Hi again, it's Rebecca Stark, and we are doing another video in my series that I'm calling Do Not Be Afraid. And again, in this series, I aim to share a Bible verse with you that in some way, shape, or form says, do not be afraid. So we're going to just dive right in. I'm going to go back to the first first book of the Bible, is Genesis 21. And we're going to look at verse 17. So sometimes, again, I like to give a little bit of context, and forgive me if you know the Bible very well. I'm just going to assume that some of my followers don't know the Bible, have not read the Bible, and really don't know much about the context. So in this verse, the characters who are listed are an angel, a boy, and a woman named Hagar. So again, just a little bit of context. Abraham is one of the great fathers, the founding fathers of the Israelite, of God's people, the Israelites. And it's actually ironic that the Israelites are named for Israel, who is actually Jacob, and that's Abraham's grandson. So it goes Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob is renamed Israel. Anyways, so Abraham is one of the founding grandfather, indeed, of the Israelites. And Abraham was married to Sarah. They have a really phenomenal story just to read through and to see everything that they go through in their life. Pretty tremendous. But let me just tell you that Abraham and Sarah were married for many years, and they could not conceive. Sarah was not able to conceive. But yet God told Abraham that his descendants would be as many as the grains of sand on the shores of the seas. And I believe also said, you will have as many descendants as there are stars in the heavens. And that's a decent number. That's a large number. So to be married, for Sarah and Abraham to be married as long as they were and still have no children, they were getting to the point of saying, God, is this really going to happen? So in that phase, that stage of fear and uncertainty and even a little bit of doubt creeping in, Sarah said, Abraham, maybe you are supposed to have descendants and they are going to number the sands of the sea, but maybe I'm not the mother of that child, not the biological mother. I'm getting old. Maybe my servant Hagar is supposed to mother this child. So Abraham, why don't you take Hagar, my servant, and make a baby with her? So that's as detailed as I'm going to get in that. They had a child, and that child's name is Ishmael. And Sarah, being the human woman that she was, she started getting frustrated once Hagar got pregnant very quickly, had this child, and she saw that her husband was doting on this child, and Sarah started getting a little upset about this. So Sarah started treating Hagar very harshly, and Hagar, in defense of both her own well-being and her son, Hagar took her son Ishmael and they fled into the wilderness. So there's the context. That's where we are. So Hagar and her son are in the wilderness. They've been in the wilderness for a number of days. I believe they've run out of food, they've run out of water, and Hagar makes the horrible decision of, I'm just going to let my son die, and I'm going to die because we're in the wilderness. There's no hope for us. So that's where we are when this verse pops into place. And Ishmael is a child at this point, and he's crying because he's hungry and thirsty. So Genesis 21, verse 17. When God heard the boy crying, The angel of God called out to Hagar from heaven and said, Hagar, why are you worried? Don't be afraid. See, this is one of the true don't be afraid Bible verses. I have heard your son crying. And what then happens is Hagar and Ishmael are given food and water, and then God encourages Hagar to go back to Sarah and Abraham, and she survives, and Ishmael survives, and that's and then the real miracle. So Hagar and Ishmael survive, and they go on, and Ishmael does become the father of a great nation, but Abraham and Sarah also have a child. So that's another real tremendous miracle that we see. And they have a son named Isaac. And Isaac then goes on, has children of his own. He has Jacob and Esau. And then Jacob is the one who's renamed Israel. Israel has 12 sons, and those are the 12 tribes of Israel. So that's just a little more than a nutshell of Bible, but still some Bible verse. But what I read in this, there's a tremendous amount of fear and doubt that's in this story of Abraham and Sarah and Hagar. Abraham and Sarah are told, you are going to have a child, but they don't have a child. That doesn't happen. And as a woman who has experienced infertility, I really understand. I understand where Sarah is, and getting to that point of desperation and just saying, I don't see how this is going to happen, God. It's not clear to me. Your plan is not clear to me. And I can tell you from my own experience, God's plan is never clear. It's not something you can look ahead and you can say, oh, I know this is what's going to happen. No. In my experience, I look back and I say, oh, look at what God did in my life. Isn't that amazing? So my experience is that I was in my late 30s. I would think I was about 38 or so when my husband Price and I decided to start a family, and it just wasn't happening. It wasn't happening easily, quickly, and yet we were watching couples around us conceive without any problems. So we did, because of my age, we did go seek fertility specialists, and it still wasn't happening. And I went through many treatments, and maybe we'll get into that in at a later session. But just know I've experienced IUI many times over. We did do one session of in vitro fertilization, and that just didn't. We had a viable embryo, but that embryo didn't survive and become a baby. What is very interesting is we did the in vitro fertilization in 2013, and our son was born in 2013. He just wasn't born to us. My husband and I ended up adopting from China. We went to China and we adopted our son in 2017 when he was 4 years old. So my own personal experience is God hears you, and God knows you, and God understands your angst. And the temptation on our side is to do something really rash and do something really like, okay, I'm just going to make this happen. Especially if you feel like, oh no, this really is, I really feel like this is something God has called me to. I always felt like God had called me to motherhood. Sarah, absolutely, she was called to motherhood. And God was telling Abraham, you're going to have many descendants. So Sarah was rightly assuming, I'm going to have a child. But yet she wasn't having a child, and she wasn't having a child. And if you've experienced infertility, you know that frustration of, I want a child, and it's just not happening. So this act of taking her slave, Hagar, her servant, and saying, here, have a child. And then seeing Hagar conceive right away, Sarah was frustrated. I understand. And I understand that Sarah got even more frustrated once Hagar had the child and her husband was giving attention to this child. So yes, Sarah was a little frustrated, and she cast out Hagar and her son Ishmael. And then Hagar is now in the wilderness with this son, and she has no way of providing for him, and she gets scared, and so she just says, well, whatever, we give up. We're just going to succumb to the wilderness. So this verse is amazing because it not only shows God's faithfulness to Hagar and her son Ishmael, it also just shows what happens when we try to take something into our own hands instead of just letting God work his magic. Because I can tell you, I look back on the pathway of me becoming a mother, and I see God's hands all over that. And it's amazing, and it's wonderful. And as I said, I will stay tuned for coming attractions. I will tell that whole story of how my husband Price and I became parents and how Patrick came into our lives. But what's important, this is one of those verses that says, do not be afraid. Specifically, it's an angel speaking to Hagar, who's in the wilderness and thinks she's just going to starve to death. And as tragic as it is that she's going to starve to death, she also knows that her son is starving to death. And that's got to be heart-wrenching and horrid to experience. But yet here is God speaking to her through an angel saying, don't be afraid, don't worry, I got this. So whatever it is you're experiencing, whatever it is you're facing in your life today, I hope you hear this verse. And officially, the angel of God is talking to Hagar, but Hagar was facing a big challenge, and the angel is just saying, don't be afraid, I hear you, I know that you're crying, and your needs will be met. So I hope you know, whatever it is you're experiencing, whatever it is you're facing, God is there for you, and all you need to do is cry out, and he will meet you where you are. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. So that's what I've got for today. I hope it helps you wherever you are, and we'll see you again. Take care.